Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome to my hobby blog. Today we are doing a very special review today. A book review, which I don't do often, but this one needs to be reviewed, I think. And joining me today is the wonderful Amber from the Road to Tavalon podcast. Welcome back.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me. As always, feels good. I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about this book.
So today we are going to be talking about this pretty short book. I don't usually read books less than 9,000 pages, but this one is like 300, I think. No, it's
Yeah,
like 250. It's like 261 is one of the final pages.
it's a
But
quickie.
it's a very nice book. I was done with it in like 3 days, just riding the bus and just reading it, like not even rushing through it. And it's the Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. Scalzi. Hopefully I pronounced it right, but he's a big name in sci-fi, and I just never even just had him in my mind as someone I should get into.
No, I've never read any of his other books, and I've heard from other reviewers and stuff. I don't know why. I found this twice today, but it was like, you should definitely not read Kaiju Preservation Society as your first John Scalzi book. And I was like, oh, whoops. Too late.
It is the most digestible book I've ever read. It is so easy to read, especially if you're a big kaiju fan, which I have a number of kaiju related stuff hovering behind me.
Yes.
But just sort of to introduce why this book was written, because I read his little like big thank you at the end after finishing the book, and it was
Yeah.
very touching to read. And he was writing this super dark, depressing book, like right at like January 2020, and then March 2020 happened, and shutdown
Hmm.
happened, and all the other just stuff happening, and politics and everything else in life. And he specifically notes many different things that made him stop writing his dark novel. And he had a due date. There were people designing the covers. I don't. Oh, it is Toy. Okay, I did not know.
Yeah.
Toy published him, but he said, "Sorry, I'm not doing this book anymore." And he had like just a big relief the moment he
Yeah.
canceled the book. And he said it was the best thing he ever did because he wrote this book in like 2 months, I think he said, in his
I
little
think it was
essay. But
five. I think I think on a podcast today that I listened to, he had said like 5 weeks to completion. So like he had it in his head and then just like went, and I'm like, that's really impressive. And also like how ballsy is it to like call your publisher and be like, yeah, I'm gonna have this book ready in 2 months, and then just like fly through it. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm not that type of person where I can be like, yes, I can do this definitely. And then like once you say that, it has to be done. So he just
mhm.
went with it. And I think that's pretty commendable. Like it's pretty cool for this guy just to be like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm ready. Like a shower thought. Just like, oh, like I have this idea in my head about kaiju, the pandemic, and then like, perfect, throw it on paper. Let's go.
Yeah, he talked about how he's known in the industry as very dependable. Like, he always turns in his drafts, like, the day of the due date. And he always turns it in, I think he said, like, 8 a.m., like, on purpose, just so he has the entire day to, like, respond if he needs to. And I'm
Hmm.
like, who else does that? I mean, maybe Brandon Sanderson, but he just dropped, like, 5 secret novels on us, like,
Yeah, but
randomly.
doesn't
But
he self-publish most of them himself too? So like I guess like a bunch of the new ones are self-published, aren't they? So he
Brandon?
doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's self-publishing these 5 secret novels, which I personally do not like at all, because you had to do the Kickstarter and you had to buy them all at once. And the shipping's $100. It is not accessible.
What?
It is
The
insane.
shipping is $100?
Yes, because it's each book is like hardback, and they're throwing in swag if you like hit the different
Okay.
tiers. And the lowest tier was like $60 for all 5 books. Okay, sure, $12 a book. Really good. But it was $100 shipping, and you don't even get them all at once. They send it to you one at a time. So it's 5 different packages. And it was getting really under my skin. So I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'll just get it whenever Tor publishes it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't buy a hardback unless like a special edition even unless it's one an author that I really really love and two like I already know it's a beautiful book so like I can see what it looks like and I'm like I want that.
Yeah. And I really want to get, because I've seen the collections of the signed, leather bound, just every book by Brandon whenever they do that.
Hmm.
The 10 years, I think. Every 10 years they do that. And I really want one for the first Mistborn book, just to have, because that was my first Brandon book, and it started my whole fantasy thing, so it's really important. But I could not
Yeah,
imagine getting it for every book. And
yeah.
doing it for a new book that nobody has read. I mean, I think the beta readers are now reading them.
Mm.
And I don't know. It's a very risky move to do it like
Yeah,
that.
risky, ballsy, all the words. Yeah.
Yeah. But just to get back to this book, I mean,
Speaking of covers though, I have the European edition one, which is kind of like red and black and very like monstery. And I really, really love it. And then the US version, the one that
I
you have,
love this one.
it has like this kind of like jungle bloody motif in the background, and it's really
And this
cool
is a dog
too.
tag, too. It's a little ID tag
Oh,
for
okay.
our characters that they have where they get into the buildings and all that. I
I
love it.
love that. I didn't even notice
I
that.
didn't notice it until I finished the book and I was just looking at it, because I always find more in covers than I realize when I'm looking at the covers after finishing the book. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's an ID tag
Yeah.
and there's blood on
They
it.
need
It
it
looks
to.
awesome.
It's cool. It's very cool.
But I guess, do we want to read sort of the synopsis of what the book is
Sure.
about?
Yeah. Do you want to read it?
Sure. Um, of course, it's a PDF that I have, so my mouse may be going everywhere in the recording. That's fine. That's me reading. So this is what the publisher, I think, wrote. So it sounds very cool, and very hooky. But when COVID-19 sweeps through New York City, Jamie Gray is stuck as a dead-end driver for food delivery apps. That is, until Jamie makes a delivery to an old acquaintance, Tom, who works at what he calls an animal rights organization. Tom's team needs a last-minute grunt to handle things on the next field visit. Jamie, eager to do anything, immediately signs on. What Tom doesn't tell Jamie is that the animals his team cares for are not here on Earth. Not our Earth, at least. In an alternate dimension, massive dinosaur-like creatures named Kaiju roam a warm, human-free world. They're the universe's largest and most dangerous panda, and they're in trouble. It's not just the Kaiju Preservation Society who have found their way to the alternate world. Others have too, and the carelessness could cause millions back on our Earth to die. Whew.
Dun
Uh,
dun
that's
dun.
like 70% of the book, I think. They just didn't
Yeah,
say the
yeah.
ending. So it's amazing. I mean, you don't really need the plot, in my opinion. That's not why I love the book. I think the plot's the weakest part. And it's
Yeah.
very serviceable, I feel like.
Yeah, it's so okay. Like things that I really love about this book is that I could completely just like turn my brain off and read and not really have to like think too hard about anything, where it's just like one of those feel good, like, this is the story, this is what happens. The characters are very snarky, like extremely snarky. I don't know if you've ever seen a TV show where it's like every character is the smartest person in the room. So like every time they're talking, it's kind of like outdoing the next person. I think that was the only like major thing that kind of like I got a little bit like, okay, I get it. Like this is kind of like a shtick type thing. Um, but besides that, it was just like a really good, like feel good kind of beginning of summer. It was when I read it. So it was just, it was nice. Like it was kind of like I could feel, I don't know, like the seasons changing, and I was back in the United States visiting family. And I think I read 75% of this book while I was in the airport waiting for my flight. Like that's how fast it was.
Yeah. I was reading this on the bus. I may have mentioned that already, but it was it's a 50-minute bus ride from my apartment down all the way to the depot and then back up because I work at the other depot. And every time I opened this book, it was like sound was not even existent for me. I was in this world. I was looking at these giant kaiju monsters. There's two of them in particular that they need to like keep together so they can make babies, and then
Hmm.
one can go take her egg somewhere else, and they're both named Bella and Edward from Twilight. And it is so funny. All the
Yes.
characters are very cognizant of pop culture. They make a
Yes.
lot of references throughout. There's a lot of Godzilla references, especially when they arrive. It's like bam, bam, bam. They talk about the different directors who were working on it. One base is called Honda base, and they're like, "What? The car?" And they're like, "No, it's Honda Ishiro Honda. I think it's Shiro Honda is the director's name of the original Godzilla. I'd look, but it's way up there in that box set. So, but like, there's all these little details, and it's not like anything big that he has to go to. It doesn't feel like I haven't read the book, but what I hear about Ready Player One, it feels like someone opened an encyclopedia and just referencing everything. This
Yeah.
this book's references are so naturally like occurring, and it's funny.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like this was our world. Like this was chronicling like our world. There's reference like pop reference, like cultural references to the sons of certain politicians and certain companies that we have, like our food delivery companies and stuff. So it's like this is definitely set like during our time, during the COVID pandemic. These are companies and people and places that everyone should be familiar with. And it kind of helps, like, I guess, let you just like slide in seamlessly, where I didn't feel like there was a big disconnect. Like if you're reading certain fantasy or science fiction, like sometimes it takes you a little bit to adjust to the different worlds and the different names. It's like not like this. This one's just like you're in it. It's easy. Let's go.
And this is the first book I've read that uses COVID-19 pandemic as the
Same.
central starting point. And I am
Same.
ready for many more books to use that, because the moment they said that and they were building up kind of that first like two chapters of her being like, "Hey, I've been hearing about this COVID thing. Like, is it a big deal?" And they have people talking about, "Oh, it's just a hoax by the insurance companies and this, that, and the other." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can put my brain right back there and like have the same exact sort of frame of reference that these characters are having of this
To,
dread and all that." So,
yeah, to me, I like that because I feel like if I had not, let's say I was a 12-year-old in grade school right now, and 10 years later, I decided, oh, I'm a big kaiju fan. So now I'm going to go through all the books and movies and like read about it. I think it would be really interesting looking at this book from the perspective of someone like in the future and kind of being like, wow, is this really like what it was like? So it's kind of like putting a stamp on like our own history in a way, even though it's fantasy, it's not real life. And I don't know if this would hurt or help. Like I feel like some people might be like, oh, well, that's just going to date your novel. But on
mhm.
the other hand, it might be kind of a cool cultural thing for someone who didn't experience it in, real world time.
Yeah, I would also love to see like a another country's perspective on, those who weren't able to shut down as much as we were because they couldn't get masks, because all these, first world countries are able
Yeah.
to buy up all the masks and vaccines and all that. I would love to see one set in like, I don't know, Asia or Africa, like a
Yeah.
COVID type sci-fi novel.
Maybe we'll have to look and see if there's one out there that looks appealing and then do that for the next
Yeah.
next book.
And it was a lot of fun to see how quick she agreed to take the job because she was like, "Oh, fuck you, CEO," and like was so awesome walking out of his office. And then like a chapter later, she's like, "Okay, shit, I'm gonna have to say yes." And she gets to the kaiju place and she's like, "Oh my god, this is the best place ever. I lift things. Like that's all I need
Yeah.
to do. I just lift things."
Yeah. I mean, for one, like I felt Jamie's like completely just like broken heart when she had to go crawling back to her old job, and she gets fired from like this great position, and they're like, "Oh, by the way, like you're fired from this position, but if you want, you can deliver food for us." And she's like, fuck you. And then like the realization, like, oh, I have to pay for my house, like my
Mm-hmm.
living place. So she goes crawling back to them. And then when she's given this job opportunity, I was so jealous because like the weirdo in me was like, I want to work there. I want to live with these people. They all seem so cool. It reminds me of like The Thing, like these people that are stuck on an Arctic base and they all live together, and they kind of they can't really talk to the outside world, like on the Kaiju Preservation Society, like it's all secrecy. So it makes them this very tight knit, closely connected, found family. And it was really fun. And again, I was really jealous, where it's like, I want a job like that. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, I would never leave. Like when
No.
I read the part where they were like, "Yeah, we have 3 teams and they cycle out every 4 months," I was like, "I won't be on any of the teams.
Yeah.
I will be on the
I'll say.
permanent team."
Yes.
Cause,
Yes.
and especially, I was always confused about this. Anytime the last person was brought up that was in her position, because she leaves a potted plant and is like, "I love this place, but I'm going back to the real world," and I'm like, she was there for 3 tours,
What's wrong with
I
you?
think. And I'm
Yeah.
like, do you know COVID is a thing? Like, get back to the
Right.
kaiju Earth. Like, don't leave. Like, why would you ever leave? Like,
If
it
I
drove
feel
me
like if you
crazy.
were a single person with no family and like no pets or whatever to take care of, yeah, I could live there. Absolutely.
It's definitely a found family. And there's a lot of tropes in this book.
Yeah.
Because I was looking for a character list. That way I could have them straight in my mind. And I couldn't find any, but I found the TV tropes website. And they had this book on there, and it was like 40 tropes, like, consistently throughout this book that I guess John Scalzi used. And I was like, this is the best way to use tropes because it's so, like, safe, this book. And it's so
Mhm.
feel good and wholesome, and everyone is loving each other, and everybody has doctorates in this team, but they don't
Yes.
treat Jamie any differently because she has a master's, I believe. Just never did the jump to PhD, and they don't
Okay.
treat her any differently.
I have to say something because you did the exact same thing I did. When I first read this book, I read Jamie as a woman. And I think right after I read the book, because you said she, I was
Is she
watching.
not?
No, I'll continue.
Okay, sorry.
So no. So I was watching a YouTube review of this book, and they were like, I really love Jamie. I think he's like a really good character. And I'm like, wait, he? And I was like, did I screw up? I mean, I read Jamie as a woman, but it's because I'm a woman, so I just like inserted myself into it. And I went back and flipped through, and I was like, there's no he, her pronoun in the book. It's always Jamie, they. And so I was like, oh, holy shit. Like, he totally left it gender neutral. And I mean, I feel like that has to be a choice because I mean, the world that we live in, it's too easy to just, put that binary stamp on something and be like, he did this, she did that. So I mean, he went through the whole book without referencing whether or not Jamie is male, female, non-binary. And I thought, oh, okay, like that's really freaking cool. Like, and it took me, I mean, I didn't even realize it until I heard someone say he, and I was like, wait a minute, did I? But no, I think that was kind of cool. Especially because I could put myself in Jamie's shoes effortlessly. Like I could see myself as this character.
Yeah, and because we do have a non-binary character in this
Mm-hmm.
book, and I was curious if anybody else noticed because it was about a quarter of the way through. Neve is constantly referred to as them and they,
Mm-hmm.
and there was one sentence I think that finally tipped me off because I don't specifically look for, you know,
Yeah.
these gender kind of concepts
Mm-hmm.
because I just assumed Jamie was a woman this entire time, and I looked on Google and I typed in character list, and as I was typing it in, it was like which gender is Jamie, and I didn't
Okay.
think anything about it, and I was like, oh, that's a weird question. It's a woman, like obviously, like I just
Yeah.
I never even realized that they never give a pronoun for
Yeah.
Jamie,
And I
like.
mean, I think it's cool. Like it reminds me a little bit of, I think, the story behind Aliens before they cast Sigourney Weaver. They were like, Ripley can be a woman. Let's make Ripley a woman. Like it doesn't change the story,
Yeah.
whether it's male or female. And I mean, can you imagine what Alien would be like without Sigourney Weaver? Like it wouldn't be the masterpiece that it is. So I kind of like think that having Jamie be whomever they are and not needing to label it is just like cool. Like I'm down.
Yeah, I never realized that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no problem. It was one of the first things I noticed after I read it, and then I had to like comb the internet to make sure that I wasn't like misremembering everything. But yeah.
I'm gonna look at the notes real quick, but there's so much to talk about in this book. But I think one of my cons for this book, because everything's a pro in this book for me, but there's one slight reservation I had, which was how quickly everything wrapped up at the end. I did not want to stop. I was like, this could be just an entire series. And it felt
Yeah.
like a Star Trek episode was like, you don't need to, like, it doesn't really matter, like, when it takes place. If there was, like,
Yeah.
sequels or anything. Just a day in the life. Like, a slice
Hmm.
of life, I guess they call it. And I loved it. And I did not want it to end. And especially with how quick the ending was for this book. It's one chapter. She
Yeah.
does like 50 different things and 50 different locations and times, and it was a slight
Yeah.
like thing for me.
I have one thing that I mean, it's not really a criticism because it's like I wanted more, but this whole alternate Earth that the Kaiju Preservation Society is on, so it's like a alternate Earth where, they get in, and the only way that they can get back to the other side is like coming in the way they came through, or something terrible happens, nuclear explosion, and then the barriers between both worlds start to merge. So I'm here like reading through these chapters about the biology of this planet and what it looks like and what the kaiju look like and what their um, parasites look like and how they survive and what their biology is like. And it was just so little that I could have read, half of the double the amount of the book, like that much. Like, give me everything. I want to know about this whole other earth. And I don't think that's really a criticism because it's just like I was like thirsting for more.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see, like, if so, I read that this is possibly going to be adapted for Fox television show, which
Mm.
would be very cool. But I can imagine if like this was adapted for cinema or TV, it would be a lot less of the exposition because we wouldn't need to be told what the kaiju look like. We would just see it and it
Yeah.
wouldn't be like, oh, like I have questions. But as a reader that really loves these sci-fi tropes, I guess, I was like, give me more, more kaiju, more creepy stuff.
Yeah, I just had a really cool thought, and I don't know if the author plans on making any more books in the series, but I want to see, and maybe it's because of my career, but I would love to see like a cartographer just exploring this world and drawing the maps, and just
Yeah,
because they talk about, oh, we're somewhat, in Canada, like that's our general
Labrador
location.
or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
which
was
is
like,
like thousands of miles of like forest in the tundra, right?
yeah.
Like
And I was just like, can we see like everything else? Can we just get like, and people complain a lot about how Dune is very like just this master tome of ecology, all about Arrakis. And it even ends with, at least the edition I had, it ended with a scientific essay, like studying the
okay.
ecology of Arrakis. I would love to have an entire book like that for this
Yeah,
world.
absolutely.
There's
Me
no
too.
way I would not read that.
Well, I mean, if they made it a TV show or a movie, I know John Scalzi would come out with another book. Like, I feel like that's just the type of person he is, where he would be like, all right, I'm ready to make this deal. So, Kaiju Preservation Society Part 2, I guess. But I think this book, it would be a perfect book for adaptation. It reminds me of like a big summer blockbuster where it's not something that takes itself too serious and it's just kind of like you go in the movie theater, watch, eat your popcorn, leave with a smile on your face.
Yeah, a similar, I guess, movie that I feel like is exactly the same in terms of tone is like a Marvel movie, like a Spider-Man movie. It
Yeah.
feels exactly the same. Everyone's quipping. There are dangerous parts, and it gets serious during that, but then something funny will happen.
Yeah.
Like, towards the end, they see an intern, or they don't know it's an intern. It's this, like, scary guy in, like, military uniform, and he shows up. He's like, what are y'all doing here with the flashlight and everything? And they
Mm-hmm.
just punch him and just knock him out and spray him with the pheromones where the
Yes.
parasites won't eat
Yes.
him. And they're like, just dump him in the woods. Like, don't worry about him. And they
No,
get
I forgot about that. It's so good.
and they get captured, and they're like, what'd you do to our intern? Like, he was the nicest guy. You guys are like shitty. I can't believe you guys just dumped him in the woods. And they're like, we
Yeah.
sprayed him.
Yeah, he's fine.
It's like, he'll be okay. And he survives. I mean, the giant, I guess, CGI fest, if it became a movie,
Yeah.
it would definitely
Yeah.
be a CGI heavy ending.
Hmm.
And he gets out too. Everyone else is fighting for their lives. And he's just passed out in the woods, and nobody even tries to eat him.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the whole usage of the pheromones and like the
Yeah.
science behind it because I mean, let's be honest, the way that it's described in the book, it's like easy, like these pheromones do this and these pheromones do that. So we're gonna synthetically create them and now we can kind of get the kaiju to kind of do what we want. Where it's like convenient, but at the same time, like I don't need to think about it that hard. Like it's serving its purpose. This book is short and it lends to like some really funny moments. I mean the coconut crab parasites, like I loved that so much. Like I wanted to call it like a hazing moment, but at the same time it's not really hazing because it's important that these people understand how dangerous the world they are in is.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a really fun moment in this book. Probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, my favorite is the pheromone that smells like oranges, I think they said. And they were
Yeah.
like, that's the worst thing ever. Do not be anywhere in the location if you smell that. And I think at the middle point, because in the helicopter with Edward, Bella, I think that Bella was laying her eggs at this point, and they get like this weird like invasion event
Yeah.
by a different company, and they show up and they smell all the oranges, and they're like, "We gotta go now," and that's when they see the iPhone or something of someone recording what happened to
Yeah.
Bella because she just disappears. And I love that, like that payoff with like, oh, if you smell oranges, like get away.
Right.
And then at the end of the book, it's like a heavy scent of oranges descended upon us, and that's
Yes.
when everything goes to shit.
Yes. Yes. I mean, there are worse smells out there. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, orange is very identifiable. So, yeah.
Yeah, and my eyes started to glaze over a bit during the science scenes because Jamie is not a scientist at all. Well, I go again. She lifts
Yeah.
things, and she talks about a lot. She's like, yeah, everyone else has a doctorate but me, and she's, pretty
Yeah.
insecure about it. And nobody really cares, and they still explain the
Mm-mm.
science, and they're like, if you don't follow, that's okay, because we know what's going on and we can
Yeah.
keep you safe. Just don't put on the orange smelling one. Put on this
Yeah.
awful smelling one. They will think you're
Yeah.
a kaiju if you put this pheromone on.
Hmm. I think I liked Jamie. I think they're a good main character. There were other characters too that I thought were just like effortlessly cool, like the helicopter pilot Martin Sati. I could picture him in my head. Like I could see him with like aviators
Mm-hmm.
on, like cruising around and kind of like I pictured him with an accent for some reason. I don't know why. Um, but like just very cool. And then of course, like he kind of is one of the unsung heroes at the end where it turns out he's like what is it like secret Canadian military or
Yeah.
something, like the highest ranking you can possibly be. And he's like, what, did you really think that they were just going to let these schmucks into the Kaiju Preservation Society and none of us would be like super expert, top secret, highest, skill set of what we can do? And I thought like, oh, okay, like that makes sense. Duh. Like, of course, a company, I guess Kaiju Preservation Society isn't really a company, but I guess this organization would be full of like people who just lift things and then people who are like super secret military assassins. Not assassins, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
And I love the part where I think it's um, whoever the main, I guess, supervisor is. They are handing out the books of all the different subjects that everyone has to study up on when they arrive. And I think it's the organic chemist. Let me bring up the name. Dr. Karangi. Karangi. I hope that I said that right. But they show up and they're like, what the fuck? Mine is like this tiny little like thing, like this notebook. And they're like, yeah, nobody has really broken ground here because you'll get killed. Good luck.
Yeah.
Like, read what you can.
I like too, it becomes immediately very obvious how chaotic things can be in this place. Where, I mean, one of the first helicopter rides they're on, like, shit almost hits the fan, and it's like, okay, like, we turn around now. And it's kind of like, okay, well, that's just like how we're starting off at. And then as the book goes on, you get more and more kind of like these uh-oh moments where it's like you don't think that everyone's in mortal danger because you know I don't think that Jamie is going to die right as soon as she gets to the Kaiju Preservation Society, but it's fun kind of like how they had these like minor chaotic events kind of like strewn throughout the book. So it's not just boring to people who are like, okay, like I don't really care about the science and that are just there for more of the action. So I think it's like done pretty well in that regard. Like it has a little bit for, the super nerds or the people who are like Marvel fans where they're like, I'm here for the jokes and the action.
Yeah. And there was a lot of hints of everything going wrong beforehand. This preservation society has been around since the 60s. So it's been running for 60 years, lots of time. And they talk about, oh yeah, there was a disaster at this location because we learned that kaiju love to be by water when they give birth to the thousands of little kaiju monsters, where most of them will not survive, but the strong ones, they'll get really big, just like Bella. And I love that
And
setup.
yeah, and the cool thing, I think like the thing that was like I loved was because it was like, oh, and when they, have their eggs, they pretty much become nuclear fusion plants, and the barriers between our world and their world start to break down. So not only is it chaotic because they're acting chaotic, but you have to be careful that, there's not a breach. And I loved how, like, obviously it's kind of like a callback to, Godzilla and um what's the word I'm looking for? Nuclear.
Mm-hmm.
And like we're kind of like getting that from it. And that at the same time, we've got like callbacks kind of like strewn throughout the entire book to, like you said, like the producer, I think, from Godzilla, or was it the
Oh, the
writer,
director.
director?
Yeah, Ishiro Honda, I remembered. So,
Okay. And when they first like reach the base and they're kind of like initiated, they all watch Godzilla together. So like I think that was kind of cool where like you could tell John Scozzi like is a real like kaiju nerd, and he like put this stuff in the book for other nerds.
one of my favorite moments in the beginning of the book, and this is when I was full commitment, finishing the book like this week, was when they show up and they're like, wait, this is another dimension? Like, what happens, like, how'd y'all know about, this multiverse dimension? And they're like, oh, back in the 50s when we were nuking the ocean a lot, an actual kaiju showed up in our world. And the Japanese saw us chasing after this kaiju, just keeping an eye on them. And that's how they made the movie
Came up with the idea.
Godzilla.
Yeah. I really like that too.
And when that happened, I was like, I love this book. I love everything about it. I just want to keep reading. And then I was
Yeah.
done 2 days later, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I loved this book. Oh my gosh. Like, that moment just blew me away because I was like, how is this entire kaiju thing? Like, a kaiju has to be known about in this world. Like, to be called the Kaiju Preservation Society. And of course,
Right.
there was a real Godzilla. And they were like, no, it wasn't a lizard or anything. It was just this hulking monster that we were able to cover up. But all the big, rich CEOs, politicians, army generals, everyone knows about this. We just don't talk about it.
Yeah, and there's like plausible deniability because if anyone does talk about it, they sound like a raving lunatic. So like who's gonna be like, the government's hiding, there's really kaiju out there, because no one would believe them anyway. So they're like essentially pretty safe, I guess, except for, huge spoiler warning, but the bad guy of this book, he's trying to, profit off of the kaiju. And like that's where the whole kind of like the big bad climatic ending happens. But I liked it because I was like, yeah, there's totally people out there who would do this. Like totally. There's some rich billionaire CEO who's like, oh, like this is interesting. How can I cash in off of this? And yeah, I think I don't know anything really about John Scalzi except for some of the interviews that I've listened to with him. But I think like just from reading this one book, it was very apparent like what his views on certain things are and certain social issues. And like I think there's like no questions about it, how he feels like politically and where
Oh
he
yeah.
stands on certain, views. So I don't know. I think I would read more John Scalzi book after this. I would have to like look and see which one would be a good place to start, maybe.
Yeah. I really felt that in the beginning, especially. And reading his essay at the end, I mean, he very pointedly uh, identifies some events as one part was the January 6th, and he called it an insurrection. He was like, I felt awful when that happened. I just had dread. And so it's really obvious, and I would have a hard time recommending it to some people, I think, because I think
Yeah.
a lot of people don't want that line, grade
Hmm.
or, blurry between real life and, this fun
Yeah.
sci-fi book.
Right. Right.
And one thing that is driving me crazy that I was thinking about just now, and this is a movie here that I'm holding called Prospect. It's a really fun sci-fi book or movie with Pedro Pascal, who played.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah,
I've
it
seen
is
it.
amazing, and it's all about this father-daughter who are hunting resources. And I was
Hmm.
trying to think because I viewed the final act of this book as like Jurassic Park, with the main.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Jurassic Park 2 more like where we have the other organization coming in with mercenaries trying to take the data
Hmm.
and all of that. And I was like, how would I define the first half? And I think it's Prospect, with it just going through the scientific sampling and, there's not as much of cripping in this movie, but this movie came out in 2018. I think John Scalzi watched it because there's a lot of similarities in the plot, I feel like.
Yeah.
And that just popped up in my head as you were talking about it. I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder. Like,
I mean, he seems like the type of person to be into something like that, where you could find it, like kind of pieces of that buried in his work. I mean, like there's even the idea of the kaiju having parasites. I don't know, was that like first done by Pacific Rim, I think? Like
I think it
the
was
kaiju's,
Cloverfield because they have
was
the
it Cloverfield?
little, like,
Oh
crab
yeah, the
monsters falling off.
spiders.
Yeah.
Like the spider things. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah.
Because they
Um
don't name Cloverfield. They name Jurassic Park, Godzilla, a bunch of different
yeah.
movies, but they don't name drop Cloverfield.
Cloverfield's great. I loved
Yeah, same here.
Cloverfield.
We need more in that world.
Yeah, what was the one with John Goodman? I thought it
Oh,
was
10
gonna have
Cloverfield Lane.
yeah, I thought that was gonna be like about monsters and like when I got to the end of the movie, I was like, shit. No.
It's just a
But
claustrophobic nightmare the entire movie.
yeah. I mean, it wasn't bad. I was just
No,
waiting for
it was
something
really
else to
good, but
happen. Yeah.
they did not need to call it that because because there was a sci-fi movie that was like, I guess, had a commercial during the Super Bowl, and they were like, oh yeah, it's out now on Netflix, go watch it. And it was set in the Cloverfield world, and it was
Yeah.
very Expanse, kind of like, where they get sent to the other side of this dimensional portal
Hmm.
on accident. And my thought just went right out my head when I mentioned that.
It's totally
Oh,
fine.
but at the end of the movie, they show the Cloverfield monster as a grown up, and it like goes out of the clouds. But I don't think they called it Cloverfield, and that was kind of the issue with 10 Cloverfield. I feel like.
And then there was like, what is it? Like the Cloverfield Paradox, which was like a
Oh,
space
yeah,
one,
that was the
right?
one I was talking about. So they did call it
Okay.
that,
Yeah.
but that one was a lot more sci-fi than John Goodman
Yeah.
in a cellar arguing with people, which I love. I love those type of movies.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
I
I
was
mean,
also
John
looking.
Goodman's amazing at everything he does. Yeah. No, I mean, like, I feel like KPS, I'm going to keep saying that because Kaiju Preservation Society is a
Yeah.
mouthful. But KPS like has this like great potential where you could make it like a group of like very episodic stories where it would lend really good to like seasons of television or something. And I think like that's kind of like the exciting thing. Like if this was something that gets picked up, it seems like that's a possibility right now. Like it's being floated to Fox.
Hmm.
But I could see like this being a really, really fun show. And at the same time, like a lot of I mean, the meat of the book is more about the characters. Like, we don't spend a lot of time with the kaiju itself. I mean, we don't even really know what it looks like. It's kind of like, yeah, like you kind of like get to see it from like a very, very far away where it's like, oh, it looks like a mountain. And it's like, oh no, that's the kaiju. But you don't like get to know like what is the texture of it? Like, what is it? How does it move really? Like, what does it look like? And I think that could make like a really cool, like, oh my God, monster moment, sort of like Jaws, where you wait and you don't really see the monster until like later. And then
Hmm.
it's kind of like, oh, there it is, which would be like a really fun kind of like way to approach a TV series or a movie, I think.
I
Or
think,
maybe it's just a trope I really like.
yeah, I think this would be a really good book to have like a or series to have like a multiverse sort of thing, because he talks about how there's other universes out there and they don't know what's there, because the kaiju one is the only one that has a nuclear power on
Yes.
both sides, so they can go
Hmm.
in and out of the gates. And I think John Scalzi should
I
be,
loved that part.
yeah, I think John Scalzi should be using this KPS series as like a refresher if he ever needs it. Like he doesn't need to do
Yeah.
like every 2 years. Like I don't want that. I just want it whenever he's ready to tell a story.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a map maker, it could be somebody, I don't know, cave exploring and finding like water kaiju. Like
Well, they could do it too, where I mean, like in the books, like they serve their tour and then they like swap out for a certain amount of time. So, like every season could be a whole new cast, and it would just be like, what crazy shit happens this, season? And I mean, I think that's always kind of interesting too, because some shows like rely so much on like the one like we got this one really important actor. And I'm thinking of like The Walking Dead, how like as soon as the guy that played Rick or whoever was gone, it kind of like turned in the show kind of became The Walking Dead. But
yeah.
I mean, they could make it really fresh and have like new people coming in and out, and I would still probably watch something like that despite like having new faces every season.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because doesn't American Horror Story do something like that?
Yeah,
It's a new cast
yeah.
every season.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean they reuse some actors and actresses, but yeah, for the most part, I'm not a huge American Horror Story fan though, so
Yeah.
don't quote me on that.
Only first 2 seasons for me. That's all I
Yeah, I
needed.
don't I don't know. But I mean, I'm just a baby. Like I can't watch scary stuff, otherwise I don't sleep very well.
Yeah.
Unless it's monsters, then I sleep like a baby. It's like something huge smashing cities, sleep right through it. Totally fine. Ghosts, demons, hauntings, can't do it.
That is fair. I'm a big monster movie fan, and that's why I love Pacific Rim so much, because it felt like a Power Rangers like
Yeah.
movie, but given a budget that it actually deserves. because
Yeah.
it was the first kind of big kaiju movie where you could see everything. They are doing giant battles,
Yeah.
and it doesn't feel like dumb because it's Guillermo del
Yeah.
Toro. He's a very smart filmmaker,
Yes.
and he knows how to do it. He's a big fan of the genre, and that movie.
Even like the kaiju like flying through the building and then it kind of like zooms in on something is I think used from like a different Godzilla scene. Like there's little like callbacks and it's so good. I love Pacific Rim. I don't care if it's cheesy, like I love it. Don't care.
Yeah, I'm
Love
gonna go rewatch
it.
it today now
Yeah.
because
What
I
is
was.
it? What is the speech with Idris Elba? Like, today we are canceling the apocalypse. And I'm like, tell them.
I never saw the second one. I know
Me
it's supposed to be
neither.
awful, and so I just pretend like they never made a sequel. So
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about.
yeah, they didn't make one. If only they
Yeah, I have
would.
no.
Come on, Guillermo.
No, I mean, I think there's just something I don't know exactly what it is about like monsters, like kaiju, like big giant creatures is just so much fun. I mean, maybe this is why like they came to John Scalzi during the pandemic because during the pandemic, a lot of people felt like they didn't have control of their lives, of the situation. Like there's just what can you do? The virus isn't like human, it doesn't have thoughts, it's not trying to hurt people because it's evil, like it's just biology. And that's kind of like the same thing with the kaiju, like they're not here to like be big and scary, it's just what they are, like can't fault them for that. So I mean, there's something kind of like I don't know, like when you don't feel like you have any control, you can watch this movie about like this big hulking creature and know like this isn't real life. Everything's either going to end up good or bad. It's just like this animal, really. So like there's something kind of comforting about it for some reason. Like I don't know. Like what is it about monster movies, big monster movies that make some people so happy, And maybe that's what it was for John Scalzi, like pandemic, and he was like, I gotta get this out of my system some way. Yay, kaiju.
Yeah, and at least for me, I grew up on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and I have to
Hmm.
wonder whether John Scalzi was also a Power Ranger kid, because that would explain a lot. I mean, they fight big monsters on there. It's very funny and very goofy, but I think for me, it's like we never see, a giant creature just smashing buildings and just
Yeah.
one hand wave, just moving their arms. And um, there was one point I was going to make that I keep losing, but
I
um,
keep doing the same thing. It's a real like it's been so hot here in Europe, and I mean I keep kind of like shorting out because I'm thinking about like really warm.
yeah. Oh yeah. So there's a great kind of kaiju homage movie that Bong Joon Ho made, and he did Parasite, he did Memories of Murder, all these great South Korean movies in the thriller genre, and he did a kaiju kind of passion project, a little like this book,
Interesting.
but it's about the South Korean. They have a nuclear reactor, just like in Japan, that goes off,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to think. I think I'm mixing up with another movie. No, so scientists are pouring down like chemical solutions down the drain, and it's played hilariously by Bryan Cranston. He's like before Breaking Bad, before I think Malcolm in the Middle. No,
Was it
just
before or
after.
after Godzilla? Because he was in a Godzilla as well.
I think it was before because it's 2000.
Okay.
I think 4 that it was made. So
Okay.
I guess around the Malcolm in the Middle era, but he
During
pulls
the
down.
HAL era.
Yeah. He pulls down a bunch of like chemical toxins down the drain, and a fish gets a hold of it and becomes this like super fish with legs, and it runs through South Korea, and we have the amazing Song Kang-ho, who is probably the most famous Korean actor out there. He's in every Bong Joon-ho movie. He's in a bunch of Park Chan-wook films like
Okay.
JSA, and he is trying to save his niece who has been captured by this fish creature. And there are so many references to kaiju movies in that. And I was
Okay.
very blessed to find out that Bong Joon-ho is also a big fan of that entire
He
genre.
did he did Snowpiercer the movie too,
Yes.
right? And did you know the set designer that we talked to for The Wheel of Time was a set designer for Snowpiercer?
Oh my gosh. The sets are
And
really amazing in that movie.
oh my God,
Everything
are
is
they
so deliberate.
beautiful? Oh, it's so pretty. Yeah, I could go on and on about that type of stuff, but I don't know. Like, I'm a sucker for that, like the color palettes and everything. I'm just like, ew, that is cool looking.
Yeah, the color palette for God, what's that movie called? The Host by Bong Joon Ho. The color
Ooh.
palette is like green and blue because it's this fish creature,
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
it is awesome. There's a archery and a archer who is like this total badass woman who like takes on the fish
Okay.
throughout multiple points.
Send me a link to it after we're done. I
I
gotta
will.
find it and watch it.
It is a great little South Korean kaiju movie, which I don't think there's any popular ones outside of that. So
Yeah, I would watch them all if I could. It's just a matter of like finding them, and I don't know. It's hard too because I'm in Germany, so a lot of the times it'll be like if it's Japanese, it'll have German subtitles, and it's really hard for my brain to work that fast when I'm trying to watch and read and translate. So I have kind of a hard time like finding this type of stuff.
yeah, but we're about 4 minutes away from an hour. So if there's is there anything else you want to talk about before we reach that? Or
Um, just shout out to the bad guy from KPS, Rob Sanders. Totally, I mean, I could see this person in our own world. Like,
yeah,
I feel like this is this could happen. But I think like they did a good job with him. He was such an asshole. Like
oh yeah,
as soon as he shows up again, I was like, oh no. That's okay, this is yeah, this is the bad guy.
it's
Yep.
a big
Hmm.
cliffhanger too. At the end of that chapter, it's like, and the most wealthy billionaire that everybody warned me about showed up, and it was fucking Rob. It's like I
Yeah.
think it says.
Fucking Rob. Totally.
And that's the
Yeah.
one thing I liked about this book a lot is that they don't ever really have like a central villain in these type of
Hmm.
like societies for these type of movies. Like I think of Jurassic Park, and John Hammond is definitely him, but he's like an old man. He's lovable. Totally
Right.
different than in the book,
Right.
by the way. He is awful in the book, but they have that actor Richard Attenborough. I mean, they have to make that
Mhm.
character a lot better,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it works a lot better in the movie too. Although he directly caused the deaths of dozens of people, but he's a nice old
Yeah.
man. It's fine. But
Yeah,
we
he
never
he
had
just
like such an asshole like Rob.
yeah, he just wanted to make a theme park for his grandkids and make a
Yeah,
lot of money, but
yeah,
we'll look beyond that.
yeah. And the Jurassic Park book starts with an awesome round table committee, like secret organization meeting where they're all trying to figure out how
Ooh.
to get Richard Hammond because he's disappeared and he's spending hundreds of billions a year on Jurassic Park. And I love that scene. It's like a 20-page chapter just of all these billionaires talking like, how do we infect whatever that company is? And they're like, hey, engine guy, you go get him. And that's where all that comes in because they just show up in the movie. But
Yeah, I mean, like it's interesting too that John Scalzi decided to have like a human villain because so often like in kaiju media, it's not so much like there's a bad guy, it's like the kaiju are wreaking havoc, and it's usually like a metaphor for something, you know? Um, but in this case, it was like the human element was definitely the bad guy. And I don't know if that just came from, like John Scalzi being like politically like burnt out by the environment of COVID and what was happening in the United States. And, it went that way because maybe it was completely just had nothing to do with it. But I did like that it was like we've got like a definite bad guy on our hands, and it's not just like, oh no, a kaiju is loose, everyone run.
We gotta get it on the train track so we can electrocute it.
Yeah.
Just like the Blob. That's
Yeah.
really like the only kaiju movie that doesn't feature a kaiju. That's like the closest, I think.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. There's just something about like big, scary, like super animals or monsters or kaiju. And I usually, like 9 times out of 10, I love it. And with this book, it was the same thing. It definitely focuses more on the humans than it does on the kaiju,
Yeah.
but it's still the kaiju's world. So like take that, however you will. Like it might be, a negative for someone who's like hoping for Godzilla, but it might be a positive for someone who's like not super into kaiju, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't feel like you needed to know like the kaiju genre to enjoy this book.
Right.
They explain everything.
Yeah.
So again, it's very accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
yeah.
I'm trying to think anything else that I have, but best kaiju movie in my opinion is Shin Godzilla.
We think the same on this one. I think that's like the first time we really connected where I was like no, and I think it too is because like what all the other Godzilla movies kind of focus on like the kaiju being a metaphor for this or that, but then in Shin Godzilla it's like bureaucracy that is like the fucked up thing, and like that quick like cut from like stomping, smashing, roaring, chittering to like people sitting down at a board meeting and like arguing and talking, and people like looking at their watch, and like it's just so cool and I love it. And one of the most terrifying looking Godzillas ever made, and that gives it like an extra star in my book.
Yeah. The part in the movie where they have the animal rights activists show up.
Yes.
And they're like having to debate with them. And also the running joke where we don't really have main characters in this movie or villains or anything. It's just like a situation, and the soil guy has to be like, oh yeah, he's infecting all the soil.
Yeah.
And the seismologist.
Yeah. I want that to be my cameo in KPS. I'll be soil.
Yeah.
Woman.
And by the end of the movie, our main character has like the entire title of his like job is like covering the TV because everyone's dying. And it's like, oh, now I have to do this, because in the beginning he's like an assistant like to somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And by the end he's like the lead project researcher guy.
Okay, I hope this doesn't make me sound snobby, but when the most recent Kong versus Godzilla movie came out,
oh gosh,
I won't even name the name. I don't even remember what it was, but someone I know was like, oh, it was really, really good. I really, really liked it. And I was like, oh, like I haven't watched it yet. I'll probably wait till it comes out on, TV or whatever. And I was like, you should watch Shin Godzilla. And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, just watch it. It's so good. And they came back and they were like, it's not even like, I didn't like it. And I was like, why not? And they were like, well, like it should be about, like the monster and all these people in the boardroom, and the politics was just really boring to me. And I was like, we can't be friends anymore.
I don't want to see your face ever again.
Yeah, I know, right? Never speak to me. No, I mean, I guess like that's the thing though. Even like if I want to like consider myself being snobby about it, there are still people who just love kaiju for like the fights and the action. So like, yeah, why not? Why not?
Yeah, I reviewed Kong versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus Kong, like
I loved
last
that
year.
review.
And I remember I was like, half the plots don't matter. We don't need them. Take them out. All the
No,
fights suck. Like,
when I watched it, I was just like, yep, like agree, check.
going down the
check.
list, just yep, I agree,
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah, and then you were like, my favorite movie, Shin Godzilla, or my favorite Godzilla, Shin Godzilla, and I was like, ah.
Well, that's a great, I guess, thing to end on.
I think so.
So thank you so much for coming back and talking about this book.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me anytime. I'll talk about monsters any day.
And thank you everyone for watching. Please have a great rest of the weekend. Goodbye, everybody.